Hi, today is October 15th, 2012. I'm Eve Wells, and I'm interviewing Paul Monat.
Paul Monat.
Monat.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul Monat. Not like the artist.
We had two families that weren't related, and apparently they changed the, we lost the coin toss or something like that.
Okay.
We didn't have a spelling.
And you are a cornetist.
Yep, cornet, tuba, at the moment.
At the moment, all right. I'm interviewing you for CJALL, C-J-A-L-L, which is Classic Jazz at Lincoln Library. And this interview will appear on our website, which is www.cjall.org. Okay. Now, what I'd like to start with...
All right. La musica.
Yeah, I hope it's a gig.
Okay.
She can wait.
What I'd like to start with is, when did you get interested in music? When did you start to play? And when did you get interested in trad jazz?
Oh, okay, pretty simple. I was on a farm in Palmer. That's where I grew up. I was born in Springfield, Mass. And on the farm there were 21, not foster children, but estate boys that were, at the time you could get them out of juvenile court or whatever and have them work for you. And we had a big 300-acre farm. And one of them brought home a sousaphone, which I had never seen before, and I think I was only 7 or 8, and they let me blow one note on it. And from that point on, I was just enamored with the whole idea of something like that. And then I heard, my father was Gene Krupa, aficionado, but he loved marches, and he got me interested in that. And around the 4th grade, I'll never forget the guy, Putnam, he gave me a Chris Craft trumpet. So when I brought it home, my father thought it was a boat, because Chris Craft was too close to that. I did find on the internet finally that they did make that instrument. And we are members of the Family Motor Coach Association. I'm on my 5th motor coach, just enamored with camping. And we had 6 children in the family, so to have something that was relatively inexpensive to entertain the whole family, and we all love camping, we ended up getting one. And that membership allows you to have another building on the property, shall we say. My father bought a 51 Fitz John bus, another rare item. And when I was 9 years old, we emptied it out of these mohair seats. And I put a little stool in there, and around the winter time when we stopped rebuilding it, I used to take the Chris Craft out to the bus because they wouldn't allow me to play in the house. I just don't. I've never had any understanding of why.
Oh, of course not.
I sounded like Al Hurd at that point. So in fact, the first time I did it, I left the horn out there, went out, put it against my mouth, and I've never been the type of kid that would put his tongue against a cold flagpole. But don't need to when you do that, you know. It's just... So I played and I played and I played, and I was so intent on impressing my parents. I learned, that was an Ave Maria, and I worked my tail off learning that. Finally brought it in the house and had my mother cry. I love making my mother cry. And my father did too, but I don't know if it was the same reason. But my mother was a Metropolitan Opera style singer. My father was a drummer, and he loves Krupa. And I always hoped since that point in time that I would end up with Dad's rhythm and my mother's pitch, and I ended up with her voice. Which isn't really good for a guy, but anyway. And we ended up, the first thing I can remember listening to after the marches that my father, he bought I remember sitting us down and he bought a stereo, Fisher. And of course at the time the technology was such where if you bought a nice maple case and 2 speakers, you could have stereo. And the 96.1 out of Worcester was, every night I remember hearing this, 96.1 from the Back Bay to the Berkshires. And it was the only stereo station, and what was wonderful at the time, and this was in the late 50s, early 60s, we heard all of the things that my mother used to sing at, specifically, the musicals, Music Man, Showboat, and all of those. And she sang those. And when we go to bed and we'd listen to this, she'd be singing with it. My father would periodically play drums with it. But that's what we weaned ourselves on, and the marches and then the symphony stuff. I got an early appreciation for Mozart and then all the greats.
Mm-hmm.
So I started playing the trumpet too much, and my mother had this. She didn't like Louis Armstrong, Frank Sinatra, that whole her perception of that idiom wasn't really appreciated at all. She didn't like him. And I had a chance when I was 17, 16, to go to New York with a friend of mine who we had gotten to the point later, and I was getting good and playing with brass bands, hitting double high C's. And this kid, I didn't, maybe because I didn't play it as often, he ripped his chops, and we went to New York. And at this point, my mother says, no, everybody plays trumpet. The trumpet players are a dime a dozen, quote unquote. And I had been playing tuba in high school, in grammar school, late grammar school and early high school. I tried trombone and baritone, learned it, but I found out I couldn't play all of them effectively. But I could go back.
Because of your embouchure?
Yeah, the small piece of area here for the trumpet, and this area here for tuba, I could go back and forth. In fact, I got to tell you, this is the funniest thing. Brilliant piano player. I worked this weekend on a big concert thing with Guilford, Connecticut, for Joel Schiavone, who started Your Father's Mustache. And Vince Giordano from the Nighthawks, who just won Grammy, his band, and John Eric Kelso's a dear friend of mine, and trumpet player in that band. They were all, these guys were great musicians. Jeff Barnhart, who's one of the best piano players around, and Freddie Vigorito. And well, I worked 8 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday. This was something we've been looking forward to. So I just got off this, and it was just heaven to work with such brilliant musicians. John Clark, local guy who was just, he's my favorite around here anyway. Around here being the United States, he's just wonderful. And Ross Piteau, who's just phenomenal and a great person. So is John. They're all good people. And I got coerced to play tuba and cornet. And of course, Vince had his tuba there, the bass sax, and the aluminum con string bass. And Jeff, play both. Do alternating fours with yourself. I said, don't put it that way. So I held the horn like this, and I played tuba, and the mouthpieces were this far apart. And for the first time, I never did this before. But it did prove the fact that I could move armature to armature for whatever. The guy that sold me my first horn said I was a freak. He shouldn't play tuba and trumpet. It'll kill you. But it didn't really bother me. It really didn't. I could adapt real quick, and I proved it. Yes, this was yesterday, Sunday. And I put the horn there, and I did a 4-bar solo, and I did a 4-bar tuba solo, and it was so interesting. Vince is not impressed too much unless you're really, really good. Most brilliant men are, and he came around the corner, and I saw him, and I said, "Oh God." Because he was wondering. He knew Freddie was back there. There was only 2 cornets, and I was the only other tuba player to go back and forth. So I actually impressed myself for the first time in about maybe 20 years, and it was a lot of fun. People went crazy, which is the whole point, But anyway, getting back on, I did go to All-State and All-Eastern on tuba, All-District, All-State, and didn't. And of course it was all brass. I didn't go to the symphony side, I went to the brass side. And I became a very good reader on tuba and fair reader on trumpet for brass band stuff. But it's like a bicycle, more like a bicycle than a tricycle. You really have to practice the reading. And at about that time, and I had toyed a little bit with other instruments, like drums. I loved croup, and I still do. And that's why Steve and I get along great,
Yeah.
Steve Taddeo. I mean, I adore the guys playing. And a lot of people, you know, this has been a nightmare for me for years. You know, you got to be your own person, but I'm not smart enough to be that good to be go out and impress people. And the goal is to get people impressed and the desire to be entertained and clap and react. It's just something that a performer is obsessed with. To one degree or another, in my case, I find it extremely important. And you know, it's very, very difficult when you're not. I mean, I've played with bands. The worst case scenario, I'll tell you what it was. I did Satchmo 6. Now, Satchmo is Louis Armstrong. It was at Sandy's Jazz Revival, which more things have happened in my life, and most guys around here, there with Sandy Berman in Beverly. And I'll never forget how I just absolutely destroyed myself. In fact, I got on Facebook and contacted the leader of the band, who was Phil Wilson. Mm. And I apologized to him, and he never responded, so that really just kind of, you know, and this is like 30 years later, and I'm, you know, he thought I was an idiot then, and I'm an idiot now for just looking for some sympathy. But the fact that at the time, he was looking for a modern band trumpet player. And I'll never forget, he calls String Was a Barbecue in A flat. And I had been out of the reading thing, and I was, and Scotty Philbrick will tell you, he knows more about my inability to read or to deal with the, like the worst thing I can do is solfege. I'm French, I know how to spell it, that's it. Okay, that eludes me completely.
So the transposition is hard for you?
No, but that's funny. I can play in church, read the organ music and transpose up for the trumpet, or I can play C trumpet and read it. I understand that, but to have somebody say, hey, play a tune that you're used to playing improvisationally in one particular key, and then have them come in an A flat. I mean, I don't think Louis ever played an A flat. I'm strutting. And then he went, on top of that, he wanted to do the verse on an A flat. I said, that's just, so I kept looking at him. You start. Of course, I'm embarrassing him and myself. And it was a perfect example of knowing who you're going to work with. And at the time, of course, I still do this. You know, you want to play with me? Sure, no problem. What are you doing? Reggae. Oh, what the heck? You know, and I'm not that flexible. I mean, I'm relatively decent at what I enjoy, but some of the idioms like rap, I just have no concept for. I mean, to have one chord. In fact, I think it was Vince Giordano or someone sent me a cartoon of the pianist of the piano, the ideal piano for a rap group, and it was a Steinway. It was this wide, had 4 notes. You know, it's that wide. Because they only play one chord for an entire tune, and they excite everybody by adding vulgarity. How novel.
Yes.
You know.
So what got you into trad jazz?
Play
a lot of that.
I had an interview with Ron Della Chiesa 30 years ago. He asked me the same question. I have the interview, and I can remember the same answer. I said, WBAL in Baltimore, Maryland, was playing jazz, all the stuff that just completely turned me on. And at the time, I didn't even enjoy Al Hurd, even though he was never looked on as a jazz player. But he was very technical, and I was very hung up on, like Scotty, for good reason. The Herbert Clark, the Carnival of Venice, you know, Stars in a Velvety Sky, On the Hudson, those things were. I still think they're some of the most beautiful music ever written, but it involves technique too, and how well you do it. It's beautiful to me. And the unfortunate part is, well, okay, if you're going to play jazz, because I'm listening to BAL, I'm hearing all these guys playing like Frank Assunto with the Dukes of Dixieland, and of course Louis and Max Kaminsky and Muggsy Spanier. And I know I heard Wild Bill, but I didn't hear his name. But I'm sure at one point in the transition, I ran a brass wire from outside the house out to a tree on the farm so we could pick it up, because the Fisher had AM is very difficult, and so it would come in and out as AM used to, and I'd miss some of the better things. And I didn't know anything about anybody at that point. I'm, what, 15, 16. But I'm listening to this, I'm going out of my mind. My father liked it, but it was like barbershop. You know, you listen to it for 5-10 minutes. And I love barbershop. And you couldn't figure out why. My sister sang in harmony with my mother when she was 2. She's got the best ear of the whole family. And she sings, she sang Hava Nagila in harmony, 2 years old. She kind of semi-mouthed the words. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then I realized with first barbershop, but the brass band thing, everything was what Ray Smith used to call polyphonics. I had to figure out what that is, because anything with poly, you know, politics.
You played with him.
Ray was the drummer with the Yankee Rhythm Kings. And that was the first professional, legitimate activity. And that was when I was 21. But up until that point, I was just kicking around. And I played with all the greats, who I didn't know were greats. Art Hodes, Bill Davison, Pee Wee Russell. Conan was already gone by that time, I was very ill. And some local guys, Frank.
Bobby Hackett.
Hackett, this is discouraging to me. That I didn't, and even Dave Whitney invited me to meet these guys. I never got the chance. We had the guys I didn't meet, Bobby Hackett, Joe Venuti, all of Herb Pomeroy and all the later guys, they were all around, and I never met them. Benny Goodman I met, and he was a real nice person. Some of the guys that had been around a long time, knew their end was near, didn't seem to have that excitability factor. I don't know. Oh, I do know now, I'm older.
Or competitive factor.
Yeah, there's a competitive factor. I mean, it irritated me so much when I found out Artie Shaw's attitude was, oh, I did everything I don't need to do anymore. What? You know, and my belief is that every note you play is the only time that you're going to ever hear that note exactly like that. So how can you say that, you know? But anyway, my mother, getting back to my mom, of course she was the one that had a lot of talent. My dad was a lot of rhythm and he knew what he liked. My mom had the pitch. She's 82, we're going to Florida, as I said, to be with her. And she, I'm convinced I did get her pitch, and it was wonderful to have that because, and her love of the harmonies. And my harmony, I'm noted nationally, which is the only thing I'm noted for other than being an idiot. Some guys will say that. I got hit with that all weekend, that's why I say that. John Clark knows that way. But we ended up having a heck of a time with the Yankee Rhythm Kings in 1974 when the band started, November of '74.
So that was before Paramount?
Well, Paramount was later, yeah. The Yankee Rhythm Kings was the band.
Yeah.
That really started with, there was the East Bay City Jazz Band, which was before that, with my best friend's trombone player, Fred Walsh, who I found out just 6 months ago played with Wild Bill professionally. There's a YouTube of Freddie playing with Wild Bills. What a small world, you know. Connors wasn't on the scene at that point in that band. He ended up replacing Freddie later. Doc Ryan, that's a whole story in itself. George Ryan, they wanted me to meet him specifically because I was rehearsing with the Yankee Rhythm Kings and they brought me to hear this 2-cornet band. And at the same time meet Doc Ryan so I could get a job. And he gave me some pointers on how to do that, and I went to work for Choate Memorial Hospital at that point and got into the Boston area. But when we were rehearsing, I was coming in every Monday or Tuesday night. It was one of those two. It changed a couple times. From Stephentown, New York. And I drove in. It was one of the only times I ever got upset with Dave Whitney. Because I was driving an Olds Tornado, the first or second year with the front-wheel drive. And there was 2 feet of snow on the ground, and that snow's coming down. He lives in Billerica. I'm coming in from Stephentown, and I bring a priest. What the heck? Things get in trouble, you can say a prayer, I guess. And we make it to the rehearsal on time, and Davey calls and says, I can't make it, the weather's bad. I wish they had a recording of my comment when I heard that.
You probably wouldn't forget that.
Oh, and of course he's playing lead, and I'm trying, I decided for some reason, and Bob agreed that, you know, stay on the second line, the harmony. The fifth, the sixth, the fifth, the sixth. And I did for the whole year. We memorized 300 tunes, all to one degree or another complicated arrangements. Committed to memory. The technique of which Bob used worked great. You'd think it wouldn't. We'd read it to front to back, make some corrections. You know, you did that wrong. You did it. 8 guys, 2 cornets, trombone, reed, and a full rhythm section: piano, drums, tuba, and banjo. And at the time, for that year, we had a guy named John Polera on piano. He was in his 26 years old. Cal Owen on banjo, who I met. He was the first guy I met before we even rehearsed. He was sick at the hospital, and I got a job at Emerson as a respiratory therapist, because I was out in Pittsfield as a respiratory therapist. And when I was at night, I had nothing to do. I'd go down to what is now Michael's. And at the time, it was called the Stockbridge Inn. And that was the sticky wicket of the area. Sticky wicket really didn't come into existence till like the 70s. Sandy was up there, but he also had modern jazz. But this area had this Stockbridge Inn, and that's where I met Norman Rockwell. Would come in and hear us, and all these great personalities, some of whom I didn't realize, you know, who I was talking to. And then with that experience, I started to get a little of taste for the stuff that I thought I'd like. You develop this. Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. String bass and 4-beat jazz. And
So what was your method of memorizing?
Well, this was before the Yankee Rhythm came. I brought that up because Bob Connors came down one night because he was out in Acton, and he came all the way out to Stockbridge, which was out right on the border of New York. And he sat there, and he came up to me and asked me if I'd be interested in playing with a band based on Waters. And the only Waters I knew was Ethel. It's true. I said, you're building a band based on Ethel Waters? No, Lou Waters. Oh, okay. I was a complete ignoramus when it came to jazz. I mean, I knew the Dukes of Dixieland. And Al Hurd, you know, my father loved Al Hurd. We had a lot of recordings of all this. And sure. So for that year, he met me in the summer of '74. We started rehearsing November '74. Blair Betancourt on reeds. And the reason why I was out there, aside from doing the day job, was that I met a couple guys originally who were put onto me by this group in Connecticut when I was 13, 14, 15, called the Coon Saunders Nighthawks Club. It was one of the offshoots of the Coon Saunders band from the 20s. And Bob Harrington was a friend of Eddie Condon. I got a picture of Eddie Condon and Bobby Harrington. Eddie was relatively short. Bob was like 6'3". He lived to be 98. He put on this thing once a month. And this is where I first learned to play in public. I was 14, 15. They used to call me young Paul Monat. I didn't argue with him about the Monet because I was young and didn't, fight him. And I learned an awful lot from the guys down there. And they mentioned Frank Laidlaw and Paul Racucci out farther west of the state playing at this club. And I went in there and I had my horn and pushy and, can I sit in? And then they ended up hiring me. And then that's, like I said, within about a year, Connors came in and saw me and asked me to come with the band. So we were together 6 years, a little over 6 years. We rehearsed, 500-600 tunes. We recorded 3 albums for George Buck. He just reissued them a couple of years ago on CD. The first one was Walter Schwab Studio here in Concord. And the second one was at the studio in WGBH. Ray had that connection. And the third one was, I believe, also at GBH. one was live or semi-live. They had us being broadcast. The best I can remember, but I do know that my favorite of the 3 albums was the first one. Because
really?
well, it wasn't so much that Walter did such a great job. He did. The band was also playing better, and he had picked tunes out that were really good. Mm. But I really wanted to do something with this, but I was also, for reasons that will go unexplained, wanted to get married. And I met my first wife at Emerson Hospital. She's still there, in fact, she still works there. Eileen Duffy. And she seemed to like the music, and so she came up to a lot of the gigs before we had kids. But after we, had kids, it was difficult. I mean, I did what we could locally to make money, added money to the income. I did did the clinical thing until '76, and we got married in '77. I went into the engineering for about 15 years for medical. But it gave me enough flexibility so I could run around, all these places and play. And then I met a guy who was the head of a Riverside jazz band, his own band, and he was really self-taught. Ricky McWilliams and Chuck Stewart and Stu Gunn were the 3 tubists up here of that play that stuff.
Chuck played with the Paramount.
Chuck did, yes. Before he went to Arizona, and I played with him last October in Arizona.
Oh, no kidding.
On tuba, 2 or 3 tubas.
Wow.
I recommended him, and the guy hired him for this Bavarian offshoot side point. But
yeah.
The other, and Al Bernard, of course. And Al Bernard was up at Sweeney's, Gay 90s, and I met Jimmy Mazzy up there, and Mike Hashem. And Mel DeVoe, I cherish his friendship, always will. And he was the one that really taught me how to drink.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. It was, exactly. And there was a lot of scary moments up there, as you can imagine. It was the typical, it was a 60s, 70s, a speakeasy, of from the 20s. A raunchy place, and to see young people, that was the last time I remember seeing young people enjoy the music, but they had mixed it in with throwing peanuts at the tuba player and drinking themselves into oblivion. And that environment, of course, was what my mother tried to get me away from. And I did play for Al a lot on tuba. I said, "Ma, I see I'm playing tuba." She wanted me to stay on the tuba. So I kept playing the tuba. The 22nd Infantry Band and Chicopee and Northampton band. There was a lot of bands out there that were still playing. So I was going out there in my teens and keeping the chops up, reading everything. But then after that, when I left to come into the Yankee Rhythm Kings, we're reading, but I stopped reading. In other words, we read, close the book, we do it from memory. So we read it through twice, if I remember correctly. We read it, pull it apart, and we read it from top to bottom, with no stops, and we close the book and play it again. Now remember, this thing has unusual breaks and things like that in it. And of course, he was very tolerant of, I guess he knew that you had to go through this to make it reflexive, and apparently he knew what he was doing because of the band.
But you also had to have people with good audio memory.
Right. Well, they all did. They really all did.
Yeah.
Well, in the rhythm section, I mean, I know Cal could have, but he didn't have to. He had his music. John Polera had the music. The disaster was about a year later, Johnny died. And that was, 26 years old. It was sad. I'd seen him just a couple days before. It was a sad situation. We hired Bob, I'm feeling good at my age. He's going to be angry. He's going to see this on the YouTube, and I just saw
to you shortly.
Yeah, he was the replacement, Bob Carroll. I hate saying Carroll because Bob, tuba player for Turk. Well, it's being 92 years old, it's kind of hard to keep your mind together. Anyway, he was with us for a while, and Bob found Don Bennett, and Don became the permanent fixture after. Bob was with us for 6 months or so, and he would sub for us. Reggie Phillips from Concord. He played with us one night at the Scotch and Sirloin. Bob was desperate for a piano player. Reggie didn't read. What I did find out later was that he could read. And Whitney would know this. He always brought this up. The last tune of every set of the Yankee Rhythm, of every night or gig for the Yankee Rhythm Kings was Goddamn Blues, which is the oldest known blues, written blues, or recorded blues, one of those two things. And it's in D flat, which is a difficult key. It's like you just play all the black keys. And of course we all sat down, and Reggie had the music on, and we knew he wasn't reading because we'd be playing My Heart, and he was on King Chanticleer or something, you know. And so he knew all these tunes, so he played beautifully. And of course David's beaming because Dave and Reggie went way back, farther back than I did with him. I met him here with the Yankee Rhythm Kings. And he calls the last tune, Bob calls the last tune. And up until this point, Reggie was real quiet. And he says, yeah, I got that blues. It's in D flat. Reggie goes, you gotta be kidding. You know, which says one hell of a lot, you know, and David always brings that up, you know. We talk about Reggie. But what was weird is he opened up the book, he looked at the music, never looked at it again. It was up there, and he played in D flat, and it was just, he did a great job. Never know he had a problem. He just wasn't comfortable with it. He just didn't show that.
Yeah.
But there's some brilliant players. His sister was great too, Jeannie, and his son, and Jeannie's son, Phil. I only worked with him once, but he was a drummer, and he was very good. There's a lot of great players, you know. So we ended up going 6 years, and the band broke up on a very bad note. And in combination with my own immaturity, I couldn't believe this guy was throwing this really developed, hard work, especially by him, but all of us. I drove thousands and thousands of miles before we had our first gig. So I took it to heart and held it against Bob, and since apologized, but the way it was handled was, with my mentality at the time and what little experience I had about living, it was a bad scene, and I held it against them for a long time. That wonderful cornet player, Scotty Philbrick, pulled me out of the doldrums with that, and slapped me up the side of the head with a proper terminology and commentary, and we got out of that. But that really hurt to the point where I was going to quit. In July of '79. The band broke up in the early spring of '81. In '79, and I don't know where these recordings are, Ray Smith mentioned it a few times, and I just had a conversation with Vince Giordano yesterday and these other guys about John Clark, about the whereabouts of some of his recordings and the Sheets music. He willed it all to the University of New Hampshire, and nobody knows where it is. Which is really unfortunate because he had tens of thousands of albums. We don't know what happened to the stuff, and if anybody does know, call me, because I know Vince would love to get his hands on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But we were talking anecdotes, things that have happened to all of us over the years. You know, and there were so many funny stories with the Yankee Rhythm Kings. But I mean, Reggie's, you know, you got to be kidding thing is one of them. But Ray taught us a lot, and he was like the father of the band, but he laid back. He wasn't overbearing. His ego was in check, and he was, for the style that we played, he was fine. From a technical standpoint, the rhythm section was not always phenomenal. So in '79, when we did go to Sacramento the second or third time, Ray was recording with some relatively sophisticated equipment. He said he had some recordings of us that sounded so much better than anything we ever recorded before. He says every time he listens to it, he was staggered, and he put some of the stuff on his show, which I missed. But he said some of this was just absolutely, you know, it's eternal. That's how good we were. So I haven't heard it, and we don't know where it is, these recordings. But in '81 we broke up, And in '81 I started the Blue Horizon Jazz Band. And I'm going on record. I started the Blue Horizon Jazz Band. I didn't call it that at first. I got to give Stan McDonald his due because he called it the name of it because of the tune Blue Horizon, which was Sidney Bechet's thing. And of course, I had already heard Stan the first few years with the Black Eagles, and I was enamored with his playing. He was very fine. And then, of course, I didn't know who Sidney Bechet was till I met him, and then I'm listening to Sidney Bechet and going, oh, you know, this is great. And I don't think at that point, I didn't know whether I was going to go modern or, you know, revert back. And in the end, David Gerard, who was my music teacher, who died unfortunately young, was my high school music teacher. And we did a lot of band stuff. And he made a comment to me, and he was absolutely true. He said, everybody goes through the same thing. He said, you listen to Sousa, the 1800s, and you hear all this, you know, Herbert Clark stuff. Then you hear ragtime, early Scott Drapple, Lamb, all those guys. And you really, oh wow, this is great. And at about the same time, you've got the group like the original Dixieland Jazz Band, Paul Marys with the New Orleans New Orleans Rhythm Kings, and all these guys. And you go, oh, this is fantastic. And then you listen to recordings of Whiteman, of the early big band stuff, and then you get into the later big band stuff, and at the same time listen to the swing that Goodman was coming out with, and the changes that were happening in the 20s, and especially the early 30s, so that by the time you get to 38, you're going to hear the Carnegie Hall concert, you're going to go crazy, and you're going to be involved with big bands, you're going to love big bands, you're going to want to play big bands. And then you're going to hear Miles Davis and the bebop era, and you're going to go into that, you're going to love that. And then you're going to get into modern jazz, the 50s and the 60s, fusion. I got up to 38. I loved what Goodman did, went right back to 22 and never looked back, you know. And there's a reason for it, and you know, I don't know if you want me to go into this, but everybody has theories about these things. And I don't know how right. I mean, I love barbershop. Stu Gunn, who I admire implicitly. You know, he barbershop. But there's a tendency for academicians, which is what Bob and Blair and Stu were. They were graduates from, you know, Lowell, and they were. And I was accepted at Hart, New England School of Music, and Juilliard. I walked into New England School of Music. And all these kids are walking around with the instruments in their hand, and their noses up in the air. And I adjudicated. I was a nervous wreck, and I was accepted. But I walked out, and the same kids with their noses up in the air. I said, what the heck is this? Went down to Hart, was scheduled for an adjudication, walked in with my horn, saw the same type of attitude. I walked out and never looked back. I was not going to go down the academic way. And of course, none of these guys from the 20s any desire for that stuff. But then, of course, I didn't realize they were making a living drinking and playing. Unless you're into symphony, even brass band stuff, if you could read it all, you didn't need the college thing, which is antithetical, especially today. You can't do anything unless you have the college thing. But anyway, the results of, it seems to parallel in every type of thing. Art, music, those two particular areas, and just follow my thinking, and, you know, it's just my opinion, but seems to follow beautifully. When Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, all the greats, you know, from the 1600s to the 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s, went down a road. Their own personalities came out very clearly in these brilliant things they did, whether it was the concertos or the solos for piano, or what do they call them, the little quartets, and all this brilliant music that was eternal. We still listen to these things, and people that haven't heard them listen to them. Oh my God! An example, Nessun Dorma. I played it on trumpet at Kennedy Lake, and I had people crying because I was trying to play like Pavarotti, and what came out, and they could hear the chords. Some of them could hear the chords. And there was a little bit of the banjo in the background because this kid knew the tune. But it's opera. Nobody heard this until Pavarotti brought it forward now. But I got angry at my brother-in-law, who ended up, getting upset because he had heard at my 50th birthday, what is that music? And all my friends were there. Jeff Hughes and John, and they were all there playing this music, and he's 57 years old, didn't know what the hell I was playing. I'm saying, that's the music I love. Wow, that's great. That's sad. That is sad.
But there are a lot of people who miss things.
True.
And there are a lot of people who can't stand change.
But the artists do, because they want to. I think there's an innate desire to be great, and especially the ones that had a lot of talent combined with wanting to be great. In music, you ended up getting Schoenberg. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, but that doesn't appeal to me. But they changed the rules. All these other great guys over a 200 year period made these brilliant things happen with certain rules.
But have you noticed that if a musician is really, really a musician, they will like something from almost every genre if it's good?
Yes, but going back that far, the genre prior to symphonies were what? I mean, what happened in the 1400s?
Yeah, but I'm talking about today.
Right, but in general, who wrote West Side Story? Leonard Bernstein. I mean, there's an example of someone who reveled in his position in life and was brilliant and came out with something that was good, but it was way off base relative to Mozart, Beethoven. It was totally different. Had all these other ways of looking at notes. The same thing with rock. You have Buddy Holly, you have Elvis Presley, you have these guys that are taking what they're hearing as kids and developing something brand new. And then the Beatles, which is the epitome of it in my mind, they still stayed with polyphony, they stayed with harmony, they had rhythm that made sense, and they weren't vulgar. And they had words you can understand. From there are no more Beatles, there are no more Elvises. What do these other bands that aren't bad, but not as good, do to keep these thousands of people happy that happen to be under 20 and are in love with hair tousling and all of the things that we did with Krupp with his hair tousling 30 years earlier? The music changed. Nobody could really grab a hold of any one artist today and say they're as the same level as the Beatles.
Not only did the music change, but teaching music changed.
That had a major effect in my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
You ever heard that screaming? Us bombs looking around. What the hell happened?
I know, but it was great. You and Davey,
I got a picture of us. Both of us were probably 20 pounds under normal.
Yeah,
We were both skinny as rails.
Yeah, 20 years old, 23, whatever you were.
23. I was 23, Davey was 24.
Yeah.
And that was just...
That was one of the hangers-on over with Reggie there in the early days. And back bar at Howard Johnson's, the keg room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the learning on the improv stuff was there. Because we really couldn't improvise much with except for solos. And I didn't get that many because I wasn't as good as Davey. Davey really had an affinity for music a lot longer than I did. So I ended up taking second seat, but that was good for me because after 6 years, the good side was that I could harmonize with everybody. The only time Dave Whitney got angry at me, and he'll tell you this, was he was standing in the corner warming up noodling, and I'm in the other corner warming up noodling harmony to his noodling. And it got to the point where we were that tight. And in fact, that year was the year we got off the plane and Bob never compliments anybody, and he came right around and gave us both of us, he says, I just want you to know, you two guys to know I'm really proud of you. You did a great job for all of us. Because that was the highlight of the band, was the two cornets.
Oh, yeah.
But it just...
Question, when did you become Wild Bill? Because it's only recently, that's Wild Bill. And I didn't remember you as being Wild Bill.
There's a great story. No, and I played too many notes.
Should we get this on?
It's going.
Scotty Felbrick.
Yeah.
And I always admired him. His teacher was Frank Graff, and of course it was the Herbert Clark stuff. Frank was taught by Herbert Clark. Scotty has an enamored view of that whole area, greater than even mine. I love what happened back there. Arthur Pryor and those guys. But to learn the Carnival of Venice and to have that much flexibility on the horn that Scotty has. Everybody yesterday, Vince Giordano, they all said the same thing. Scotty is probably the greatest fluency trumpet player alive today. Really, as an improviser. Nobody can touch him.
And almost on any instrument.
And well, that's an aside situation.
Yeah.
I would have Scott Felberg on guitar over just about anybody I know. He's a brilliant musician. He always was. He always will be. And we became very good friends. And I have a pocket watch that he gave me on my 30th birthday, I believe it was. And I cherish it, you know. But his perpetuation of that in his playing, and my doing the same thing there for a while, and Connor's not liking that in that style we were playing, which is completely understandable, because that, you know, Lou Waters and Bob Scobie didn't play that. They didn't have that ability. One of that sound. So the guy that's responsible for me playing like Wild Bill is not Wild Bill or Tommy Saunders. It's Jimmy Mazzy.
Oh.
We were sitting in his Volkswagen. I said, Jimmy, I consider you a savant. Of course, Jimmy, oh, come on, it's not my I'll love him till the day he dies. Great guy. And he is the only savant I know of. His unusual banjo work is one of a kind. Totally one of a kind. No one comes anywhere near that in its construct. So I had and have a lot of respect for him. And I asked him, I said, Jimmy, I need your help. I said, I can't grab a hold of anything. I feel like I've already convinced myself, and I'm sure I'm right, that I'm not anywhere near brilliant enough to get out and go out on my own and impress people enough to really get out there often enough so people will hire me. You know, how can I become better than good? You know me, you've worked with me, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, I can tell you just one thing, Paul. Don't play a tenth of as many notes as you are. Find a player that exemplifies that. And I said, well, like who? He said, well, one guy that comes to mind is Wild Bill. He says, I've worked with him, and one of the things he can't stand is too many notes. And he'll sit in an audience listening, you know, at a concert series with a whole bunch of players, and the trumpet players are trying to impress him. And the more notes they play, the less he looks at the stage. He'll only look up at you if he's really, really impressed. And that was probably one of the few times that tears came to my eyes playing, because I can't get started a la Bill style with a tinge of money on a pocket trumpet, which in itself was, you know, was a gimmick, but the people that were there were really blown away, and Bill looked at me from beginning to end. And so, this was later on, but prior to that, I'd listen to him and listen to him and listen to him and listen. And the funny thing is, I went to Wyoming with this priest friend. He's still looking for me. Oh, that's Dave Whitney.
Answer him. Answer him.
Dave Whitney. Hey, Dave.
Put it on speakerphone.
Good. Well, actually, believe it or not, I'm here with Harold. I'm here at Harold in Bemis Hall, and we're doing an interview about jazz. And you're, you're on.
I just wanted to see how your schedule was looking this week for getting together.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Noontime, sometime Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Okay. Tomorrow probably wouldn't work at noontime. Wednesday might work. I have something I have to do at 2:45 over at Burlington, but I'll just stick in touch each day and check in with you.
Sounds good. Let's shoot for Wednesday around 11:30, 12.
Okay, sure. I'll give you a call in the morning. We'll see what will work there. I'm sure it will.
Thanks a lot. Say hello to the camera.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, Bob.
Bye-bye now.
Still buddies after all these
Yeah,
years.
that's weird.
Yes.
I haven't talked to him.
Yeah.
You know, in a while. Well, he was the best man at my first wedding. Of course, he probably feels bad because that only lasted 16 years and 4 children later. But
Now,
4
were
great
you up
kids.
at Reggie's funeral over there, and Dave Whitney was up on the balcony?
Yeah.
I remember that. Were you up there?
Yeah,
Then?
yeah. I remember
I forget what you
yeah.
played. This was a sad thing over at
Yeah.
the
What is it?
Unitarian
Church. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the one that Bill Patton went to.
yeah.
Yeah, and of course, all the time we were doing our thing. Later on, the Heritage Jazz Band came about, and Bill Patton, where I met him and Jimmy Mazzy, Scotty Philbrick, guy from New Hampshire, trombone. Bill on tuba, but it was that was the band with the Black Eagles who really excited everybody down at the Sticky Wicket at their height of their playing. The Black Eagles put Sticky Wicket on the map, but then the two bands together, they just attracted both styles of music and all the people that enjoyed them. And there were some characters there too that go beyond. But anyway, I started the Blue Horizon Jazz Band, and originally it was Tony Hannon on drums, who has since passed away. John Fancy, who I thought passed away, but he's up in Portsmouth playing the circuit up there. Ernie Clark, who's now the head of the music department at Princeton, and he was a brilliant trombone player. And the guy that he always admired was Craig Grant, who was on this gig this weekend. Craig was just wonderful. He's like 75, but retired. And Jimmy Fryer, who's with Vince Giordano's Nighthawks, was on trombone. So they had 2 of each instrument. And there's some just phenomenal music. I hope they have recordings of it. Well, they do. They did videos, and it'll be on YouTube. Some of the stuff was just immortal. Some of it was junk. Most of that was my fault, but that's a separate issue. We did Tiger Rag, and it was the most disjointed thing I think I've ever seen.
Was Noel Koletsky there?
Noel was there, and John Clark.
Was Craig Ball?
No. Craig Grant and Jimmy Fryer. Sal, Italian guy, I didn't know him, and Pom Pomeyer were the drummers. Ross Pitot and of course Jeff Barnhart on piano. And Vince, and a wonderful, the only female, she is my kind of gal, she's a wonderful player, Milt Hintonish. Genevieve Rose, she's from Wilbraham. She just got married. I've worked with her at the Entanglewoods Boathouse up there with Frank Laidlaw, and she's just tremendous. Reed Jorgensen, who's another off-the-wall brilliant drummer, percussionist, symphony guy, and plays wonderful jazz. Some great people up here, which is just reminding me that November 2nd, when I leave again, I'll be away from it. There's some good stuff down in Florida. Yeah. And now that they know I'm coming, in fact, I've already been asked to be the 8th cornet player with a brass, Jack Daniels silver cornet type of brass band in Tampa. So I'll be going over there on Monday nights with Lou Green from the Salty Dogs. I think he's 7th cornet. He should be 2nd, but 1st. But anyway, that'll be fun down there. John Skillman. I'm with the C2C Jazz Band, which is one of 4 bands of John Skillman, who was the clarinet player with the Buck Creek Jazz Band. And then when they disbanded, he started these groups. He goes to Florida in the winter, and I'll be seeing him down there. There's a guy named Kid Dutch who I worked with, who's got bands. Too bad you didn't come down a month before. I had 4 gigs for you. So things really are taking off down there. Yes, yeah. The only guy I knew down there was Charlie Bornham, and I don't know how much work he was doing. Bill Allred's down there, who was Wild Bill's trombone player. The Wild Bill thing, I had to tell you what happened.
That's where I saw Bill Aldred with Wild Bill on a cruise one time.
Exactly, did a lot. This is the one, a cute story I got to tell you. Bill Davison met me for the first time because I was learning how to, and Sandy Berman knew it. Sandy calls at 5 o'clock. Come up to the jazz revival. Come up. Why? Oh, they're going to have cameras and they're going to have radio. Of course, that was all a bunch of bunk. I didn't know him that well, but proved out that night. Come on up. Wild Bill's going to be there. He's going to want to see you. He says, everybody knows you're trying to play. Like, Bill, come on. I said, okay. So I go up there. And this is good to be able to put this on record because it was the most embarrassing thing I've ever been involved with. I walk in, and Carol Lee and Bill are just finishing up, setting up the first set, how they were going to do things, and the horn is on the table, and he's got his bourbon in his hand, or scotch. It was that time of year, I think, it was scotch. He would go through either one. And he says, come on, I want to introduce you to Bill. I swear to God, this is exactly what happened. I was nervous back. I walked over. Sandy's got his arm around me, and he says, Bill, this is a young guy that plays cornet up here, Paul Monat. He's going to take over for you when you get tired. I said to myself, you dumb. Why did you do this? He thought he was being nice. But his people skills at that point became very clear to me, and then I was not going to make it. So we ended up, I was there, I was listening to him, sitting there listening to him. And he's looking right at me with daggers all night.
Poor guy.
Like as if to say, you ain't covering for me, kid, until the day I die. And I'm going to put it in my will that you can't do it afterwards. So I imagine now Jimmy Mazzy and I've decided, okay, Wild Bill. I still have some black lapel pins that say, where's the melody? That was his thing, where's the melody? Everybody plays all over the thing, and the more technical, some people like listening to that. But like modern jazz, I don't want to sit there and cerebrally try to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the later developments of all types of music and art.
And vocalists.
Exactly. Exactly. Look at Salvador Dali. He ain't no Norman Rockwell. Different idiom, different style, but one is much more way out than the other. Battery's dying? No? Good. That must be my phone. I'm not answering it. So anyway, 3 months later, now talk about divine providence. I know Connors wouldn't agree with me on this. He doesn't think there is any. But I do. And 3 months later, I went on a business trip in Detroit. And I found this club. Of all the clubs in Detroit, I find this club. I walk in, and I'm hearing this cornet player play great stuff. I had already heard Ernie Carson, who I loved. And he and I worked together quite a bit, and I just, he was a character on musically all his own, musically and personally. And I walked in, and here's this guy playing a little more modern than Ernie, but that same punch. I said, wow, this guy's wonderful. I sat in the front row, and there was nobody there. I'm just looking at him playing and playing. So he comes down and he says, geez, you seem to like this music. I said, sir, you have no idea. I love this music. I was like 28, 29. Well, a little older. I guess I was 30 because of the band, the YRK broke up. This was in 83. And Bill died in 89. He was 86 when he died. So anyway, I'm sitting there. I says, yeah, I'm trying to play like Wild Bill Davis. And this was Tommy Saunders, the illegitimate son of Wild Bill. And before I forget, there's a very famous, for me, famous photo of Wild Bill, Tom Saunders, me, and John Eric Kelso in one picture, which I prize. Bill was 75. Tommy was 56. I was 29 or 30, and John Eric was 17. And all four of us were up there. And now 2 of us are gone. So that natural affinity for having that relationship will always be there with John Eric, who is just probably the better of all of them of the instruments of those guys. And Tom said, I know him, and of course we talked about it. And I get a phone call a week later after I came back from the business trip. And he said, Paul, you got to come out here. I'm going to pay for you to come out here. Bill Davis is going to be. I said, what? Do you want me to come out there with Bill? Yeah, they got a birthday party for him. I said, oh, come on. The man hates my guts. He said, no, he doesn't. I already talked to him. He laughed his ass off when I told him what happened. He said, oh, I remember that kid. So he wants you to call him. So I called him. And all I can remember from the conversation, because I was a nervous wreck. I mean, it's just... Yeah, come on out, say, kid. He said, you gotta come out and play. He says, I want you to play. He says, I said, all right. I said, you know, Sandy didn't... I don't know about Sandy. Guy didn't even want to pay me. He wanted me to sleep with his sister. So that's Wild Bill, you know. So we got out there, and one of the things that Tom Saunders remembers, it was in February, and I had Ryan and Nathan with us, and Nathan was a baby, and Tom Saunders brought it up till the day he died that we had Nathan in the bedroom, and of course we're used to cold air, so we had the transom open. We thought the transom went out to the to a room. I went to the outside, and the next morning my son is covered with snow. and Tom thought that was the funniest thing he ever heard.
Yeah.
And he told Bill, he says, that's what should happen with kids. Keep them cold, keep them quiet. You know. And the funny thing is that 3 months before he died, Bill died, I was in Santa Barbara with him. And I think I bought 5 pairs of the pajamas he wore. That day, he looked like a little baby, all pink, small, listening to an old radio. And I've listened to everything he's ever done, and I decided that he's right. If you can't wow him with emotion, with the least possible notes, you're not doing your job.
That was like Count Basie on the piano.
Yeah, when you hear it, it was just wonderful. So anyway, we're the big highlight of my life. Turk Murphy asked me to replace George Rock when we were in Sacramento, '79 in July. And if you ask Bob Schultz, he'll confirm it, because in August, Turk told Bob I couldn't do it because I had a child in my hand. I says, well, I'm Catholic, Turk. We agreed I was going to have 10 kids. She agreed we were going to have 10 kids. And, you know, he said, yeah, well, that'll get in the way of the rehearsals, he said. So I don't regret what happened, but I really can only imagine how much fun I would have had replacing Leon Oakley, and of course George was there for a short while. And since then I played with about a dozen and a half bands in New England, Steve being one of them. This Saturday I'll be up in Bowdoin College with a band. I've been up there every fall watching the football team fall on its face. I don't think they've ever won every time I've been up there. I told them, I said, why don't you not get somebody else on cornet, maybe give them some luck, you know. And that's basically...
It's gorgeous up there, the pines and
Bowdoin. Yeah, that whole area is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I guess we're getting the...
All right. I have been interviewing Paul Monat, and I'm Eve Wells, and we're signing off.
Good. Now we'll let it run. That was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I kept getting the highlights in my head. I said, well,
I didn't know that about you and Turk. I didn't know you had...
Turk Murphy asked me to play as a replacement. I offered myself...
because I loved Red Helm. I loved his...
Bob Helm.
Bob Helm, yes.
Yeah. And of course, I think he was one of the most underrated clarinet players. He had his own style.
Oh, he was
but,
great.
you know, until later when he got drunk.
And the vocals.
And the vocals.
The vocals were pretty good.
Yep. Yeah.
And you were... Who were you talking about there? Oh... Well, when you were talking about Jimmy, who learned his own way of fingering, he reminds me of Clancy Hayes.
Oh yeah,
that's.
But he told me once that he's combined the best of in his head, in his mind, in his heart. Clancy Hayes, Elvis Presley, the Rhythm Boys.
Yeah.
Bing Crosby.
Yeah. From Monday on. Yeah.
And putting them all together.